What's up, guys? Today we'll be talking about the Head Radical Tour Co., which might be the most underrated paddle that's on the market right now. Prior to the release of the Radical Tour Co., I was not a fan of head paddles at all. I felt like they were all generally very mediocre and their spin potential was extremely low. I think in my very first spin test I did, the Head Gravity Light was under 1,000 RPM, which is one of the lowest tests I've done to date. Well, with the Radical Tour Co., Head has made some very impressive updates to the paddle, and I think it has become one of the best value power paddles you can buy right now. Before we get into it, if you guys are looking to pick this up or any other paddle, I'll have an affiliate link to Just Paddles that helps support the channel when you purchase in the description. Just Paddles offers free shipping on all orders and they ship same day as long as it is ordered before 7 p.m. Central Time. So if you're looking to pick up a new paddle, check them out. Both of the Tour and the Tour Co. can be purchased for $134. They're standard shaped paddles, have a 15mm polymer core, a handle length of 5 inches, and if you purchase from Head directly, you have the option of a 3 7/8 inch grip or a 4 1/8 inch grip. And the paddle on average weighs 8.1 ounces. The only difference between the Head Radical Tour and the Tour Co. is that the face materials are slightly different. One is using a composite face and the other one is graphite. On paper, these are very underwhelming specs. There's nothing about this that seems like it would be impressive. One thing I do want to commend Head on is their impressive handle. While I'm not really a fan of short length handles like this, they've made a very nice feeling octagon handle, and I wouldn't expect any less from a tennis company to have a good handle. But it feels extremely well built, and I thought it was worth mentioning. The spin potential of the Tour Co. is really good. In my tests, I got 1568 RPM, which puts it in the high tier for spin. This is a massive step up from the previous Head Gravity Light, which was under 1,000 RPM. While the surface doesn't feel like the spray-on grit that you find in Franklin paddles, I can't tell you how durable this is. I can tell it's a noticeable step up from spray-on grip because I've used it for several weeks now and I'm not seeing any degradation in texture, whereas with spray-on grit, normally in about 3 play sessions I can make a paddle smooth. There are a few minor face chips on mine, so it's hard to say how long this will last exactly, but so far it's holding up pretty well for a few weeks of use. In this price range, this is some of the best spin potential I've ever seen. The main rival is the Omega Max for $140, which was doing 1,700 RPM. When it came to the Tour, I got a result of 1,466 RPM. While the surfaces feel the same to the touch, there is clearly a difference between the composite and graphite in terms of how much spin they can put on the ball. 1,466 is still a good result, but 1,568 is just a little bit higher. What's really interesting about these two paddles is the Tour Co. is supposed to be a power model and the Tour is supposed to be the control. I've hit both of these quite a bit and I've never had as hard of a time telling two paddles apart as I have these two. So far I've gravitated towards the Tour Co., but I'm honestly not convinced that if you blindfolded me and had me hit these, that I would be able to tell the difference with good accuracy. Usually I'm very good at telling two paddles apart, but with the only difference in these being the face material, I just think they play too similarly to tell apart accurately. Most of what I'm about to say I think generally applies to both of the paddles, but I will be talking about the Tour Co. moving forward because that's the one I spent most of my time with. Despite one supposedly being for control and the other being for power, in my opinion, they're both power paddles. The ball feels like it flies off like a rocket, especially on the Tour Co. Despite being 15mm, I really feel like you can generate some insane power with this paddle. I'm not normally a fan of power paddles, but for whatever reason, this one feels really fun to use. Hands battles are really enjoyable because you have just a little bit more pop off the face, which makes your shots come back that much faster. Putaways and drives are also a lot of fun because of the amount of pace and spin you can generate. I also think for singles, this is a fantastic paddle because in singles, one of your main objectives is really just trying to hit drives and passing shots, and I think this paddle does that really well. Since this paddle leans so far into the power side, you're definitely going to sacrifice control. I found that I have to be much more intentional about softening up my grip to reset, block, and dink well with it. Usually it takes me about a game or two to get warmed up and adjusted, but once I do, I think it feels great. Just know that if you can't control power paddles at all, or you don't like playing with them, then I definitely wouldn't recommend this paddle for you. The days when my soft game are off, it's even more exaggerated on this paddle. The sweet spot is actually pretty good. I find that even as you get to the edges, the ball stays quite lively instead of just dying. You definitely get some harsher feedback and you obviously don't want to hit the edges, but I find that the ball stays alive longer than some other edge hits on other paddles. I'd put it at about a normal sweet spot with a good roll-off in performance rather than a hard drop. When compared to something like the Electrum Model E, which lets the ball sink into the face quite a bit and has a more muted feel and absorbs pace, the Tour Co has the opposite feeling to me. To me, the face feels very stiff and crisp when the ball hits, and the paddle feels very lively. The ball also hops off of the face a lot faster. It gives you a pretty satisfying feedback with every hit, which is not something you'll hear me say very often because a lot of the attributes that this paddle has are not usually things that I enjoy. But for whatever reason, I really seem to like it on this paddle. Out of the box, both of these paddles were just around 8 ounces, which is a little lighter than I usually prefer. I ended up adding lead tape at my usual spot, which is the bottom 2 corners, because I wanted to see if that would make the paddle feel just a little bit more solid and stable. And while it didn't make a huge difference, I do think it added a little bit more stability to the paddle. But my main goal was really just adding weight to the paddle. I wasn't as concerned about changing the performance. I haven't noticed any durability issues in the time I've played with this, except for minor chipping of the face. Like I said earlier, it doesn't appear to be taking the grit off, but it's hard to say how this will hold up after months of heavy use. My honest guess is that the grit is going to smooth out eventually, but I've used this paddle for a few weeks and it's holding up very well, so it's not something that I'm particularly worried about. When Head sent these to me, they said they were very confident it was an improvement over their previous lineups, and with how bad I thought the old ones were, I really didn't think it was going to improve much. But I was definitely wrong. I genuinely think this is a super fun paddle to use on the court, and while I don't believe I'll be switching, it's honestly a paddle I love to have in my bag because it's such a pleasure to use. I think if I had to go play a tournament tomorrow with it, I would be just fine. It's even funnier to me because almost everything about this paddle is usually the opposite of what I like in a paddle. I tend to like softer paddles that absorb a lot of pace and don't provide very much feedback. My current paddle of choice is the Project Lab 003, which is very different from the Tour Co if you've hit both. While Head really didn't do anything groundbreaking with these two paddles, I think they did the basics very well and created a good performing paddle for $134. I think part of what makes this paddle feel so good is that lower price point. I think Head probably could have charged up to $160 or $170 and it still would have been a good value, but at $134, it feels like a steal of a paddle. In this price range, there are very few paddles that will do power and spin as well as the Tour Co. The only real competitor I can think of right now is the SLK Omega Max. I think my biggest feedback for Head would be to separate your paddles a bit better in the future. The naming scheme being Tour versus Tour Co is very confusing to the consumer. I think it would have been much better to call it the Head Radical Tour Control and the Radical Tour Power. This would have made the intentions of the paddle much more clear to the consumer. It's even worse when both of these paddles are basically identical in spec except for the face materials and a slight color change. Even with that difference, in my opinion, they don't play different enough to warrant having two entirely different models. I think the composite face of the Tour Co was the better option, and they should have released the regular Tour with different specs like an elongated shape or thicker core to help differentiate these more. So who is this paddle for? This paddle is definitely for those of you who want good performance at more of a budget price and are also a big power player. I think this paddle performs exceptionally well for singles because of the good spin and power. If you don't play singles and are more of a soft game player for doubles, I don't think I'd recommend either of these. You really do have to put in work to keep your hands soft when using it, and I think for a lot of soft game players, trying to adapt just for this paddle wouldn't be worth it. But if your budget is up to $140 and you're a power player, then this is a super easy recommendation. I think this paddle is severely underrated, and I really hope to start seeing it on the court more. This is absolutely going to become one of the paddles that I recommend to people trying to step up from a beginner paddle. So there you guys go. Those are my thoughts on the Head Radical Tour series. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to click the like and subscribe button down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.